Well, I see that you're an audience well acquainted with your topic. So today I would like to talk about packaging, and we spoke about temperature, and also Daryl explained when the product and temperature comes together, how that influences the whole scenario. And I think the next aspect is to check out packaging, and how does the packaging that you choose fits into the value chain and into the cold chain. Just a down arrow here. Let me just see without my side arrow. Okay, good. In the end, there are various options for packaging, but in the end, it boils down to probably the sale down there. It is what is the packaging delivering what the customer wants and is prepared to pay for. From that point of perspective, is the customer expects high quality food, surely. Very often it is seasonal and needs to be convenient packaging. So seasonal means that it needs to advertise that this is the first of the season, or it's something special. It needs to be fresh. There needs to be sufficient information about the nutrition, but also about the transparency through the whole supply chain. For example, the packaging there on the left is on white grapes, and you can see that there's a number of information there. And because the packaging is keeping the customer informed, this was one of the first ones where they decided to take away the expiry date, the sell-by date, because the whole value chain and the transparency of that should have installed enough confidence in the customer that they can make that this product has not been mistreated in any way, and they can make their own informed decision about the quality of the product and before they discard it. And this is an initiative to actually cut down on waste. So really important to understand what the customer needs. So now you know that the horticultural crops are different kettle of fish, all of them. If you compare broccoli and sweet potato, they couldn't be more different. The one is a root tuber, and the other one you've learned now is an inflorescence there on the left-hand side. Although I had the one wrong, I thought it was was to Brussels sprouts, but it must be close, I'm pretty sure. So if you think about the characteristics of the product, Daryl very clearly showed that it is alive. It's very diverse. That sketch tells you that. And because it's alive, the moment that you harvest it, its whole environment changes and it starts deteriorating. It can bruise, and it's basically a package for water with a little bit of flavoring and texture in it, because fresh produce have a high water content, which due to this vapor pressure deficit, the difference in temperature and also vapor between inside and outside the product can affect how the product behaves. So growers spend an enormous amount of time and energy and resources into optimizing growing their product. They will monitor the nutrition, the water status, and many other aspects. And the moment it gets harvested, in a way, it's sort of, they lose their grip on it. And one of the last things they can do is put it in a package that meets and the demands of the cold chain, and then also monitor that to see that the product which they have cultured and had a look at so closely is now not lost. So you know the cold chain, it gets harvested, goes through the package set, there's an opportunity for the cold chain to be broken, it needs to be cooled down, it can either then go in a container and be trucked out or shipped out or go to the local market. Similarly, that product can be packed in different ways. You have the individual fruit that are in the internal packaging, then the different cartons needs to be stacked in a pallet. In the pallet, fresh produce can be very heavy. Think about a box of apples or even lettuce. The pallet needs to be strong enough, not too compact, especially those layers at the bottom, but at the same time allow the access of cold air to move through the product to remove the internal heat that they produce, and also the ethylene that will build up. If you put it on reefers, the way that the reefer aeration is a little bit different, so you need to manage the cold air and also ensure that your pallet stays intact. So the purpose of the packaging is, if you look at textbooks, they will say it needs to contain your product, protect it, inform and sell the product, and lately also meet environmental requirements. So it needs to be reusable and recyclable. In terms of that snack tomato packaging, won the Carton of the Year award for 2022 in Europe. And if you look at the purpose and the requirement for packaging, you can imagine why that packaging won the award, because in many ways it meets the requirement, it informs the customer, it can cool it down, it reduces water loss, prevents contamination, and many of the others. When you consider which kind of packaging you'll be using for your fresh produce, the design and the material of your choice will look at cost, strength, your destination, is it export, is it local, and also the effect on fruit quality, or if that's vegetable quality. And if you look at the design, no, it doesn't have a little arrow, but you can see that all those factors actually have some trade-offs as well. Sometimes you can have a fantastic packaging, but it's just not cost effective compared to the value of the product. Or you will have a trade-off between ventilation and strength. So the more holes you have, the more ventilation it is, and that can either be good or bad for the product depending on the characteristics of the product, but it will impact on the strength of the product.
There is a point there if you want to use, okay?
Oh, that is, I am missing it here, this
exactly,
one?
Exactly, just press the top one.
Oh, the top one. Okay.
And then there will be...
Oh, you're misleading me. I think, right.
You also move with these lines.
Yes. Okay. Too much technology, no. Just one of my, oh, no, that's, okay. Okay, so the product that you have needs to be compatible with the packaging and also the time that the product will spend in that packaging, because those three factors will interact with each other and can't be seen isolated. If you consider the thermal conductivity, so the heat loss, will be different for products that, for example, with lettuce, where there's a lot of leaves that you have air trapped inside, that conductivity will be lower for lettuce than, for example, for a pumpkin, which is a solid without those duvet layers, you can say, those baggage layers. And moving down it, so conductivity is really low for lettuce, meaning it traps the heat, compared to a mushroom where it has a surface that are exposed, it has not a skin. Similarly, so the skin and shape and structure of the product will affect the way that it loses its heat to the environment. At that graph, so it's the, just don't know, never mind. I do want to point, but is this the pointer? Okay. It's like a star show, something. Okay. In terms of the graph, you see that the difference between the temperature of the product and that in the environment, that temperature differential, determines how fast a product will cool down. And initially, it happens quite fast. But then as it slows down and it moves and it meets the air of the room or of the water or whatever the receiving product is, then that is slowing down considerably. So it may even take hours, days, or never reach that temperature. So therefore, often you don't measure the time that it takes to cool down. You measure it in the cooling time, which can be a fraction of the original temperature differential. So if you have, for example, oranges and you have it in packaging to protect this high-value product, and the first one, the wrapping, disturbs the air, then that product will be slower in cooling down when you have the same kind of wrapping, but air can actually, like water, just flow over pebbles. It will flow, the air will flow over that packaging. So the way that you put your packaging will influence the cooling down of the temperature. In terms of ventilation, I worked a lot with cut flowers, and I know that's also a love of Daryl. And we used to joke that growers think the holes are only there to carry the boxes. Because those boxes had notoriously few ventilations, and probably also for reason. But you need ventilation to circulate air, but without weakening your structure. So you can see in terms of that box, there's cotton, there's ventilation holes, because if you put the box into like a forced air cooler, the cold air needs to be pulled through the box, through the product, surrounding these products, so that temperature can be transferred to the air. Normally 5% holes are sufficient, and through calculations, it appears that a number of large but few holes is better than small but many holes. The thing to remember, it's also in your orchard, so is that air is like water. It has a natural flow and it will follow the path of least resistance. So if you want to force cold air through your product, you sometimes need to block some of the vents and make sure in the placing of your pallet or however you position your product that you make sure that the air does go through and not around, let's say, the boxes. However, the same trade-off, if you do that too rapidly, especially with sensitive products, you can induce chilling injury, which will lead to deterioration of your product, browning of your product, and then the onset of pathogen infection. I think Roberto will refer more to this. So just the other aspect to temperature is to contain moisture of your product, because exposing it to cold air is dry air, it will dry out your product, is to maintain the relative humidity as best you can. So you can have liners in, small perforations will allow still for gas exchange, but not vapor exchange. So you want to prevent your product from becoming anaerobic, so therefore you need to have a special kind of packaging that will also avoid condensation, which we know will lead to pathogen growth. Again, the kind of packaging you choose needs to keep in mind the product that you have and the rate of your cooling. Last slide, before I share with you a little trial that we did, is that the carton strength and the pallet stability is affected by many of the factors, the flue types, the type of board that you're using, the folding designs, the vents, all those things. And you want a nice straight pallet, because the products here at the bottom, they take a hammering if you have the weight of the pallet and the box collapse. So the last thing that you want to do is have a scenario like that, because you can imagine the stress and the respiration rate going up of that product. Okay, so we did a project with the Growing Queensland Food Exports, which is now under Jodie's management. And the aim of the project was to look for packaging actually that can replace wax cartons, with the incentive that wax cartons are non-recyclable and is not accepted in export markets such as Japan. And if we want to enter those markets currently, having packaging that are not compliant is one of the barriers. So we came across a package company, and they made claims that they are 100% in the closed loop, reusable and recyclable design, that they use 65% of natural elements, lower carbon emissions is used in the making of their product, it's waterproof, you can print stuff on it, and it has different folding designs. So what we did is we trialed lettuce, which was one of the products that we had in mind for export, and it was a very simple experiment where we stored it at 2 degrees for a period of 10 or 15 days, and then we had a 7-day vase life, or not vase life, a display life at 5 degrees. And then we compared that with a standard wax box and 2 different designs of this unicorn box. I just want to share something. It was funny to me. They gave us the boxes, had seafood printed on them because that was just the prototypes that they had. We delivered it to Sutton Farms, or we went with the boxes to where it was stored overnight, and I think it went for vacuum cooling, and the next morning we collected it for our labs. When I collected it, the lady said, yes, we had nice seafood last night. And without all three of us that worked with the boxes ordered seafood takeaway that evening, just showing you the power of advertising. And I never ever take seafood takeaway because my family's not fond of seafood. But that night I thought, I had a friend over, maybe I'll have seafood. And then all three of us had seafood that night. So just beware those subconscious messages working with these boxes all day with the seafood printed on them. Nevertheless, those were our trial boxes, and they were traveling with the normal wax cartons. So the experimental, there was a control where it was not stored at all, was kept fresh, like for the domestic market, stored for 10 days, stored for 15 days. The current design that Sutton Farms are using is the open top wax carton. So we also used the open top unicore and then a closed top one. And we measured we evaluated over 3 or 4 times. We looked at the weight of the carton, how the carton behaved, the rating of the carton, the lettuce weight, the color of the lettuce, and other characteristics. Okay, so the results, the first thing about the carton is that, and you all know that paper cartons pick up weight as they pick up moisture. So the wax carton, over the 30 days that they were stored, they picked up 8% of their weight, whereas the unicore is not paper-based, so it basically didn't pick up any weight. If it picks up weight, obviously that weakens the carton. So when we rated the cartons after they've had the product for 30 days, we saw that the wax carton obviously did not rating scale, very simple, 1 to 3, had a rating scale of 1, where the others had the top rating scale of 3. So because the whole product is very different. The lettuce, the one thing that I was slightly surprised with was, not surprised, but the blue line here on the left shows you the quality rating of the lettuce over, 2 minutes, over time. So the blue line is the wax carton. And there we saw that, obviously that was so the blue line is the fresh one, and a fresh product was the best, but the green line was the one that was stored for 15 days. And although you would expect something that are stored longer would have worse quality, the difference between that 5 additional days of storage was quite significant to me. If we looked at the quality of the lettuce within the storage, the blue line showed us that distinctly differently was the one stored in wax. The storage duration is that for the rating of the lettuce just on day 7, again, the blue line is the wax one, which had a worse rating than the other 2 that were comparable. And the wilting of the lettuce, we saw more wilting with the ones in the wax carton than the other 2s. So concluding from this study, we saw that the cartons themselves didn't absorb moisture, so they had a better quality. The longer, if you are in the game of delivering to the domestic market, your current storage is probably sufficient, but if you're moving over to export and you store for longer durations, you need to look at your product differently. The lettuce within the closed top, the designs made a huge difference. The closed top lost less moisture than the open top, okay? And when we compared the color of the lettuce stored in different cartons, the one stored in the wax carton was less green, less bright green, and that was picked up significantly. The next step is that we decided, so it looked very positive that this new, and the supplier said that it would be affordable, is that we actually did a semi-commercial trial where these boxes were loaded with other commercial lettuce by Gibb Brothers and sent to the Brisbane market. And we saw, unfortunately, that although some were traveled well, we did see bulging at the bottom. So the next step is probably if there's an opportunity to include these boxes for a semi-commercial export trial to Japan, and to go back to the manufacturer and to the company and say, please look at your design and maybe do things differently. To conclude, just in general for your packaging, when you evaluate, these are the different components to have a look at. So just not, there are different aspects that contributes to that. So just thanking everyone that contributed in that trial, which was the Sutton Farms, Gibbs Brothers, student Darryl, David Carey, Jody, and Bronwyn. Thanks very much.